Hey, I'm Azure, back with a continuation of my Black Mage JP Opener optimization series for T, this time for Phase 3. As before, I'll be discussing tips to maximize damage, and I'll be assuming that you already know how the fight mechanics actually work. Furthermore, I will assume that your global cooldown is roughly 2.18 or faster. Links to my videos of the previous two phases will be in the description. Phase 3 is mostly just 4 reopeners, which makes it easy to practice on a training dummy outside of the fight if you want. As such, in the description I will also link all 4 of my reopeners for convenience. Going into time stop, I assume that we have access to all of our cooldowns, with triple and swift coming back up later in the phase by the time that we need them. Furthermore, I try to have 2 polyglot stacks, with another obtained during the uptime of the phase. We'll want to precast Sharpcast pretty late, as well as ley lines and potion before time stop activates, since time freezes during the time stop, and we have little time to do so after time stop. The time stop reopener phase is about 29.75 seconds long, and our final cast will be instant to make sure that it lands in time. Thus, ley lines can fall off before that last instant at no loss, allowing us to precast ley lines a couple seconds early at no cost. After time stop, we really only have time to do 1 full Astral Fire phase, extended by Mana Font, and 3 spells, which will be 3 Xenoglossies in a perfect scenario. If you entered with 2 Polyglot stacks, you can safely spend a couple Xenoglossies early under raid buffs, since your final spell will be an instant cast to spare. If you entered with the phase with 1 Polyglot stack, then you'll need to save 1 Xeno to be your final global, because your final global must be instant and Blizzard 3 will need to be cast before it. If you entered the phase with 0 Polyglot stacks, you'll need 2 additional spells. These will probably be Blizzard 3 and Blizzard 4, but this really shouldn't be the case outside of early prog scenarios. Again, in this case, save a Xeno for the very end, because your final global must be instant. Note that the Firestarter proc lasts a long time, so you can use more powerful spells under raid buffs, and then wait to use your Fire 3 proc as long as your Astral Fire duration allows it. Furthermore, Triple and Swift are used late in order to prioritize making Despair instant, and to a lesser extent Fire 4. It is important to end this phase with precisely 0 polyglot stacks, because the inception downtime is a little bit longer than 60 seconds, so we're guaranteed to overcap if we don't spend them. If we started the phase with 2 polyglot stacks, then note that we might have to use 1 early before raid buffs depending on push timings to avoid overcapping during the time stop reopener. After the first Flare Thrower, and before the second, make sure to use Sharpcast so we can set up a Thundercloud proc later and still have Sharp back by the time we next need it. Just after the True Heart starts moving, cast Thunder 3 on it. This will allow us to use the Thundercloud proc as our second global post-inception, since sometimes you'll need the first one to be on a xenoglossy in order to avoid an overcap. I recommend using a thirdial manipulation, or sprint, in order to go to the correct location since we will leave rather late. With my group strat, I manip to a healer normally, and a tank that I'm going to be stacking with if I have shared sentence. The Inception Reopener is actually around 31.2 seconds long, so we have to be a little bit more precise with ley lines than we did before if we want to squeeze in that last global. I time the ley lines to be a little bit less than a half second after Super Jump lands, with this rhythm, bum bum bum, where the first bum is Super Jump landing, the second is me using ley lines, and the third is Alex becoming targetable. Furthermore, this is the part of the fight where I decided to switch from a 2.18 global cooldown to a 2.17 in order to get increased consistency in landing the final global, since casting Despair or Xeno on thin air is frustrating. I'm unsure about whether it was really necessary or if I just needed more precise leyline usage, but I would recommend the 2.17. With a longer phase than before, and no mana font to extend Astral Fire, we must go to Umbral Ice at some point to reset during this phase. I weave Sharpcast after the guaranteed Thundercloud proc we set up earlier, so that I have a Firestarter proc to use to weave Triple Cast, which I'll use to finish up the Fire phase early. Thus, after Trick disappears, I switch to Ice and use Xeno as my filler spell since Blizzard 4 is pretty worthless, and reapplying Thunder without a proc is silly in such a short phase. After getting back to the second Astral Fire phase, we have 4 spells to use before Alex goes untargetable. The final 2 will be Xenoglossy and then Swift Cast Despair, and we do not have time to use 2 Fire 4s. This really just leaves us with the 4 spells being Fire 1, Fire 4, Xeno, and Swift Despair, or Thundercloud proc, Fire 4, Xeno, Swift Despair, if you get a Thunder proc. Again, we want to use all our polyglot stacks to avoid overcapping. Wormhole's downtime is only about 43 seconds long, but that's still long enough to overcap if we aren't careful. After the final Void Puddle dissipates, and as you're heading towards the center, is roughly when you can Sharp for the upcoming reopener on Alex, but the timing is not strict at all, since we will not be able to effectively use Sharp for a while afterwards. With the 2.17 GCD, you'll want Fire 1 as your second global, and Xeno as your third, assuming you're using Adelon the Mega Holds. Aside from that, this is just a boring fire phase since we are saving everything that we have left for the upcoming burn. Swift cast the Blizzard 4 though, to ensure that it hits Alex on the way out. You have a second or so of time with nothing to attack here, which is perfect for weaving Sharpcast and ley lines. Thunder 3 on Cruise as soon as it lands, in order to get a Thunderclap proc that we'll use a little bit later to throw on Brute. The sooner you can throw the proc on Brute, the better it's going to be. However, I personally have a hard time targeting Brute immediately with all the screen shaking, and don't like risking hitting the invulnerable Alex. Thus, I wait until Brute shows up on my enmity list so that I can target him easily, and hit it with a Thunder proc then. However, it would be optimal to do so immediately and before raid buffs go out on Cruise. In any case, weave triple cast after Xeno or Thunderclad proc in order to waste no time in animation lock the way you would if you weave triple cast after Fire 3. Right around your Fire 1 cast, it should be time, or past time, to focus Brute and leave Cruise to dots and AoE. Make sure you have a Xenoglossy or a proc in order to weave Mana Font, and the rest will essentially play itself. If Brute is still alive when you're casting Blizzard 3, consider using your personal defensive mana ward to survive the hopefully final J-Wave. Furthermore, I would recommend erring on the side of wasting a cast on Brute in order to ensure Brute dies. The healing check on Brute Justice is much harder than the DPS check on the phase as a whole. Be a team player and don't fret about your personal DPS losses if you don't need the damage. The transition from Alex hitting 0% to becoming targetable in phase 4 is about 73 seconds long, so feel free to use Sharp, Swift, and Triple at will because you will get them back in time. Try to end the phase with 2 Polyglot stacks for next phase, because they will be very helpful for dealing with the large amount of instant casts that you'll want at the beginning of Perfect Alexander. If you use Mana Font on Brute Justice as I do, then it will not be up in time for your reopen on Perfect Alex. That being said, no matter when you use Mana Font in the entire fight, phase 4 is just shy of 6 minutes long even if you're the last one to be imprisoned. Because you only get 2 uses no matter what you do, I choose to ease the burden on the healers during J-Waves. It also doesn't get you extra Fire 4s in the phase 4 reopener, but that's a topic for the next video. As I mentioned at the beginning, all the reopeners I recommend will be in the description for convenience, and if you have any questions, comments, or improvements, feel free to post them below, and thank you for watching.